Today I'm going to show you how I arrived to one of the most incredible bits of propaganda I've ever seen, all starting from a World Food Program UN post. The UN, through their food program, which has been around since 2007, has a social impact challenge where they work with Games for Change. They are a known WEF lover, and I found them initially through Dr. Cowart, who works for Take This, which received the $669,000 grant to study extremism and terrorist recruitment in video games for 2 years. She's now working on writing about Taylor Swift fans. Very important work. And this is to have people make games to end world hunger. The only comment on this tweet is someone claiming they lack accountability with discriminatory practices. Interesting. They don't seem to be a hit with the people, yet they get an insane amount of funding and even boast about it from America. Yet since 2007, we are no closer to solving any issues. I digress. I've talked about Games for Change before, shown some of their used symbolism and who works with them. Attached are images from the UN's WFP website. If you scroll down Games for Change, you get to one of their latest tweets shared here. This is another UN-backed group, specifically their environmental program. The irony to all of this, given the electricity used for not only playing games but making them, the best solution that they could offer is to actually get rid of electric use entertainment and encourage everyone to board games. But we know that they won't do that because targeting children is their endgame for cultural control. When you go to their website, you're going to see some interesting ties, Ubisoft being the big advertised one. Funny how Ubisoft has all these resources to give to fund siphons, but they can't seem to figure out how to run their studio anymore. If we look at the first image, playing for the Planet Alliance consists of the following member categories: game studios, trade associations, and industry supporters. These are some of the members. Note Games for Change, Microsoft, Google, Sega Europe, notice the specification there, Supercell, Ubisoft, and UKIE, or UKIE, which I wrote about them recently. You're basically forced to work with them, and they promote DEI aggressively. I've written about them extensively before. There's also a much larger list. You can see those in the tweets. Here is some of their propaganda requirements and what they're expecting out of major companies. This is very strange behavior and works on two fronts: getting better deals with certain governments and, of course, boosting that spicy ESG score. The fact there is a section on UKIE, though, is indeed fascinating. Microsoft Corporation is an American multinational technology company, blah, blah, blah. They talk about the cloud and intelligent edge of it. Its mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Sounds very profitable. Anyway, Microsoft will reduce their carbon emissions across scopes of activity to become carbon negative by 2030, I'm sure. Reduce its supply chain emissions by 55% by 2030. And none of this can actually happen because of AI and their cloud-based services. Continue engaging gamers in sustainability efforts in real life through the Minecraft Build a Better World initiative, which has seen players take more than 20 million in-game actions. Now, Minecraft is obviously very important, and they do a lot of fun kind of building initiatives and things like that. But it's interesting that they do just target gamers through this. Again, the best thing they can do if they want to save the environment is to actually shut down the entire game industry because of the energy use. You don't need it for survival, but, what do I know? Their segment on UKIE just consists of be carbon net zero by the end of 2022. They don't do much. They send emails, and they handle communications between government and game developers, basically. So they're not producing games. I don't know what kind of silly performative business this is. Produce a green games guide and promote it to UK businesses, which is, of course, another problem because, again, they bully you into signing their DEI pledges and things like that, and those efforts are still ongoing. Anyway, moving on. Here is where they trap smaller studios, claiming to offer resources and connections if you give them money. This is also where it starts to sound like a cult, but this is only baby cult language. More will come later. But first, gaslighting. I don't doubt that they actually polled a few people on a college campus for this. Maybe 50. The third image gaslights the shit out of any possible metric. How did they collect this data? Where did it come from? When did it come from? How many were polled? Who was polled? Did they even play games? What game genre did they play? These are basic questions we are taught in not only Biology 101 when forming a hypothesis, but Stats 101 too. So someone clearly didn't pay attention in college. It is important in most, if not all, experiments to be able to reproduce the steps to get to your conclusion. If all you do is make a claim with no supporting evidence or how to reproduce what you got, well, guess what? That's not very good science, and it's not very convincing. Potential reach is another predatory term to look bigger than what they are, and you will see this among left-leaning media mostly, and it's how they again seem louder than they are. We recently saw this with Out Making Games, where they claim to represent millions of LGBT people, but in reality, not a single person really knows who they are. Here is some Xbox-made propaganda and some cult tools promoted authors, so you can virtue loudly with the rest of them. This is the most disingenuous part of it all. To the common folk, that is a large number in the image below. In the grand scheme of things, not even a blip of concern when countries like China and India exist. But this is the kind of language that they use to prey on compassion and ignorance. Plus, they also prove my earlier point. They should be pushing people away from electronics. You do not need GTA to survive. You can settle for solitaire. But that's because they still want to sell you things and use their bullpucky to control companies. The book advertised above is, of course, made in a factory and printed on paper, which means trees died for the 278 pages of overpriced garbage. This is where we get to the real meat and potatoes of it all, however. This document right here in this tweet is 84 pages of propaganda and gymnastics, all written by the IGDA. I've talked about this group before, and it has all the big names attached to it. The IGDA is a DEI monster that takes advantage of the would-be and small game devs, promising them connections and networking, but feeds them propaganda and lies all for a nominal fee. Remember, though, this is all backed by the UN, which the USA generously pays into, and the UN boasts about that. The Twitter account for the IGDA climate segment of their business hasn't been active since 2022 because that would require actual work. But let's take a look at some of their words. Are you ready for a dive into Cult 101? Because we're about to escalate this to a DEFCON level 3 on the propaganda scale. And naturally, though, because it is hosted online, it is permanently contributing to the death of trees everywhere. I want to make, though, something perfectly clear on these 84 pages of shit. There is no hard data. They make claims with zero evidence to back it up. They do not provide statistics to show anything pressing, and instead they appeal to emotion and someone's fear while motivating through something someone can care about, example being games. There is no proof of effectiveness. There's no psychological data to show any of their claims. They make claims about themselves as well, but I can make the same claims because I took a fire ecology class in college, so hi, I guess I'm your new leading expert in climate science. See how that works? They make some references about effectiveness of games to capture an audience, but in terms of what they personally claim, there is no support. In fact, these 84 pages are a confession of how they want to control games and narratives to get people to do what they want. This is about control and nothing more. Again, attached here is what the IGDA website claiming half of players care about climate change. Where did you get that information from? There's no evidence of that whatsoever. Did you just poll people in your freaking office? It's asinine. It's truly asinine. If you go poll the average gamer right now, they will not care about climate. If you put out a public poll on Twitter, they will not care. Even if you put it out for your base, it will end up going too public, skewing your narrative. I digress. Back to the report, and it is clear they want propaganda, not immersion. They fail to understand basic storytelling elements and why they are used, and instead pervert them to their cause instead of the simplest reality. If a world looks hot, the developer has to convince the player that it is hot. Can't encourage the gamer to put the controller down and go outside to touch grass. No, that would mean that they can't control people through their video games. Again, this is 84 pages of absolute insanity, and it is difficult for me to remain unbiased when they perverse everything I love in one document, very poorly. Games, science, and psychology. This is all a cult manual, not a well-mannered, well-intentioned guide. I'm just going to now read off some of the images provided in some of the tweets. Occasionally, stop moving, gasping loudly for air. Players can also hear other characters or players coughing. This is in reference to showing fog or smog in a video game obscuring vision. The next part continues. Make a massive increase in heat apparent through audiovisual cues. In the daytime, the sun can blaze overhead and create a heat distortion effect. All of the visible plants can wilt, turn brown, and or die to indicate how they are suffering. Characters can talk about how hot it is and how it affects their ability to accomplish simple tasks without severe difficulty or pain. Why use it? Sensory effect is a pathway to establishing a pro-environmental attitude and hope through positive connections with nature and or empathy. This is insane. Another part reads, how can I utilize roleplay and game mechanics to support historically marginalized voices and advocate for climate justice? Have I convinced you? But don't worry, it gets better. There is a segment that focuses on the metagame. The metagame encompasses all of the social interaction outside of gameplay as the IGDA defines. This includes social media conversations, discussion forums, and player guides. This includes fan groups, let's play videos, esports events, modding communities, and everything in between. If you can think of a place where more than one person interacts with information about your game, that's part of the metagame. This is where it's a confession. While potentially uncomfortable to admit, it is not a space over which we have complete control. A large company can create and moderate discussion across multiple platforms. However, those spaces are still only a fraction of the metagame. They want to control everything. Why would it be uncomfortable to admit that they don't control YouTubers, forums, or discussions? Why is it uncomfortable? That is life. You cannot control people, and it is foolish, narcissistic even, to think that you can. Again, if I have not shown you enough evidence for my claims of this being propaganda and cult language, there's plenty more where it all came from. How can I create a safe space for pro-social behavior? The metagame can help players acquire new patterns of behavior and action by socially supporting and affirming the value of those behaviors. Without a community to support a new environmentalist in their journey, social pressures can overwhelm an individual and cause them to deprioritize environmental behaviors for those more favored by their community. Continued interaction with a supportive community is a key attribute in adopting and validating new behaviors for the individual. I love that they reference this because, once again, it is a confession and why affirmation is such an important word to them. There's a reason why you have to constantly affirm behaviors, affirm depression, affirm somebody's identity. Instead of talking about the reality of the situation and engaging with things that might make you uncomfortable. If you're wondering, though, where you saw these prior connections because the colors look familiar, think back to Gamescom 2024. At the very same event, the winner of an award at the non-award show goes to none other than Tencent Games. Why does Tencent keep getting highlighted at these events? It's almost like there's a pattern of behavior and gaslighting going on, and we shouldn't trust them. Gamescom has an environmental portion where they give away the Sustainability Award, a whole segment dedicated to the UN, which again is funded mostly by the USA. I leave you with these words, and I hope that my summary has assisted in getting this message out because I know that this information is dry. I have a hard time putting this in a way that maybe might be interesting to the average person, but nothing will ever change if we don't talk about it. This public information is all words that they themselves write, and it's important to dissect these things and prevent people like this who have zero education from having influence in the government. But I think the more likely conclusion is they see what the government wants and provide it so that way they can get recognition and money. Whichever way this is working, whether they're just feeding off each other, useful sheep or being sheep for the shepherd, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the game industry is struggling and these people are leading to its downfall.